Hi all, welcome back to Medieval Dynasty. Merlin here. Thank you for joining me today. Just before we start, I wanted just to run through a bit of admin info. For those that have been following my series from the start, thank you very much indeed, and obviously for anyone that's subscribed as well, again, thank you. You will notice that I've kind of retitled the series to split them up into smaller chunks, a bit like having TV series, I suppose, really. I know in the US you would call them as seasons. In the UK we tend to call them as series or occasionally seasons. I didn't want to use the word season because obviously the game is about seasons. We're in the summer season, so it might confuse people when someone says, well, hang on, this is season one. Is this the summer or is it actually a series title? But anyway, I digress. So we're now just about to start series 4. And then this is the first part of series 4. Now, part of the reason why I kind of split up the videos into these smaller chunks is I thought it'd be quite nice at certain points in time. So we're 5 years in, this is the 6th year, to kind of give us a view of where we are at that point. So moving on, as you can see here, we now have our fully aesthetically pleasing, I'd like to say at the moment, farm fields. They're not all the same. Obviously, some have got stick fences around, some of them just got pathways. I just thought I'd give it a bit of a mix and match and see how it goes from there. But yeah, fully functional fields. These 3 blocks of 4 with 1 worker in each. As you've seen in the last video, they were kind of helping out each other because they didn't have anything to do with their own fields, and that's the way I think I find it better for me, is the fact that if you mix and match your fields, then you've got some that are being harvested in the summer, been planted in the autumn, and so on. You will find that there's an people from this field, for example, will help people from this field, and vice versa. So also you may or may not have noticed, I was attempting to finish off the quest in the top right hand corner regarding the Dynasty continues. If we just go into the tab, we can safely say that my wife is currently pregnant in this series. So I would imagine this is going to probably be winter or into spring next year. She became pregnant in the spring season of this game, so I'd imagine it's probably going to be winter and maybe spring that I want to be about. So kind of give you a viewpoint on that. Now, I had a thought, because we were saying about obviously the person's going to be out of kind of the work detail, and I had a little bit of a thought about what would happen in this situation. So again, if I go into her management tab and just click on her, she works in the workshop, and I believe she's the only one that does work in the workshop. And if you go onto the workshop production, always a bit more damage to needs doing, but we'll sort that out off screen. If we look in her scheduling, we got down doing a torch, a bucket, and a wooden bowl, or just under a bucket, and 3 wooden bowls to help with things like the water and also the food. I've got someone working the well now, so this is why I need an ongoing water, and the torch is just there ticking over as we see fit. Now, the thought I had, rather than putting someone else in place, because this is a production building, and hopefully by the time she comes off of or goes on to what we call maternity leave in the game, then we will have enough materials to do what we need to do. So for example, we need logs, we need planks, we need leather, and we need sticks to do these 3 items. So the plan is, as soon as she goes into maternity leave, is to calculate how much I would need for 2 years. So for example, given that I'm working on a 16-day year, then I would need probably around 30 buckets. Given that it's three kind of lots of bowls a day, then again you're probably talking somewhere in the region of 96 bowls. Now you say that's a lot, a lot of work to do. But so basically, if I go on a kind of a bit of a blitz on logs or trees in there, I could probably make up enough wooden bowls myself to put them in stock for those next 2 years. Now that means basically that this thing can be switched down. We don't need to replace it. We'll have enough in stock for what we need. If we get new villages in, then of course, obviously, we'll adapt accordingly. But in a production point of view, if you craft enough for those 2 years, you can shut down the workshop and go from there. Now, it's not going to work in everything, and it may be that what you do is you move people around based on their skill sets, so that maybe that's for example, that someone that's in well, this one here, for example, they're in the excavation shed. It may be that you move someone from a production team into the excavation shed, so that continues to keep going. But the production side of things, you then kind of fit in the time that you would do it. So whatever that person is. So for example, if I moved in a barn worker, it may be that I take over the fertilizer or the manure or building up the animal feed to have enough to work out the difference. So again, if I go in the barn, I've got 4 workers in the barn, and they're producing 27 animal feed per day. Now, if one person comes out, it may go down to about 20. So do I then work out 7 per day for 2 years and manually do that and put it in the stock to accommodate the loss of work detail in the barn? So it's however you see kind of how it works for you, but that's kind of how I'm going to move forward. I think it's going to be something different to look at anyway. Anyway, we kind of digress slightly. We're going to move on. As you can also see in the top right hand corner, there's a silly quest called Pregnancy Cravings, which the wife wants some raw meat and some eggs. I haven't got a hen house at the moment, so I'm going to have to go and buy the eggs, but that's easy done once I start crafting. I'll kind of craft up some clothing later on off screen and deliver it across the relevant villages. I can pick up some eggs as we go along, and I'll have more than enough meat in the food storage to deal with that anyway, and that's fine. Just a quick warning, this is July 2024, so if you're watching in the future when it'll be applicable, but they've just had an update and there has been a little bit of a bug in regarding the craft and screen where people are getting stuck. Just have a look on the forums online to find how you get out of it. For the purpose of this video, I won't do any crafting on screen because just in case I get stuck. But so they will do an update, but I guess it'll be a little while just yet. Now, one of the other things I mentioned in the special edition was I reviewed your production and the buildings and how you kind of would like to plan things. And I had a little thought that perhaps this video is kind of practice what I preach. So this is basically what I did off screen. So what I've gone into is trying to go backwards and forwards in regards to the resources. So you may recall in the special edition I mentioned that it's not a simple case of, well, okay, so how many logs am I going to need based on the woodshed? It's how many logs I'm going to need based on the woodshed, the smithy, and then obviously construction. So it's going backwards and forwards and trying to work it out. So what I did on off screen is basically go through each of the buildings, and I manually made a note of what it is I kind of needed, but I started from scratch. So I would go backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. So for example, the first thing I wanted to work out is how much firewood I need. Now, being that this is the summer, I'm not going to need a huge amount. It's 274. In the spring, I think it was nearly 400. So in the winter, it's going to be 800. So you could use the seasonal management in the woodshed, but I've decided not to. I've gone back to the annual. And how I've calculated it is I've calculated the winter times 4, the number of days in the season, the spring and autumn times 8, because again, 4 days per season, and obviously the summer times 4. I've totaled up the total amount of firewood points-wise that I would need over a given year. I've then divided it by an average, so 16 days, to give you a daily average. Now, if you start in the spring and the summer, you should then have more than enough when it comes to the winter because you're preempting on that basis. So hopefully by the time you get to winter, you would have built enough logs up. And this kind of takes me into this little screen, which is your people's demand control. And I can't remember if I mentioned this before, but this is where you would potentially kind of cross-sale or disable items that you don't want being used for firewood, because any of those items can be used, but we only want the firewood to be used for the wood demand. Now, if you look at here, this is the number of items I've got stored, but this is the value of those items. So for every 1 firewood stored, it equates to 5 points in demand. So let's just say, for argument's sake, we've got 275. So 270, and this is just if it was an average throughout the year, but it obviously clearly isn't going to be, but just for the purpose of this calculation, if you were to do 275 points per day, the equivalent would be 55 pieces of firewood, because it's 5 times 55 gives you 275 per day. So 55, but then obviously if you go back to the woodshed, one log will give you 4 firewood. So if you then divide that 55 by 4, well, 56 near enough I suppose really, that's 14 logs per day. So this is where I started off, as I worked out what I would need for firewood initially. And then said, right, okay, so based on that, I would need, and you can see for me here I need to have the equivalent overall as an average of 140 pieces of firewood per day, which equates to 35 logs per day. So that's how I started to try and calculate my woodshed. Now, as you can clearly see here, I did not have enough room to make 35 logs in this particular woodshed. And this is where the second woodshed came into effect. So then you go into the second woodshed, and you go into the management screen. So then I put in the extra 3 logs into here. I didn't worry about sticks and planks at this point in time. So then I worked out, so then you move forward and you say, okay, so you then go on everything else, and you work out, because obviously what you also got to consider is your tools. So I then worked out for every building that I had that required a tool. So for example, in the excavation shed, you need your pickaxe unless you're getting clay. If you go into the farm shed, you need the bags and the hose. If you go, and also the sickles or the scythes, whichever you've chosen to do. If you go into hunting, you need the knife, and so on. And basically how I worked it out is then I go into the smithy. As you can see there, you can name your building. So I've gone into the smithy and say, right, so what tools do I need? So at the end of it, I calculated that I need this amount of tools. I've gone over a little bit because I wanted to make it full intensity, so I've gone over slightly. So I said, right, okay, so I need this amount of tools, and it's the same with the other smithy with the copper bars. You need to have your hammer for that purpose. So it calculates on, first of all, on each of the tools, your hammer, and then obviously the tools themselves relevant to the job based on the durability. You may recall that the durability will help you calculate. So for example, when it came to the knife, for example, I can get away with getting 1 knife per day, and that's more than enough for the hunting lodge villages to work out. And again, you go into here and it tells you how many logs did I need. So I need another 8 logs. But then I also needed so many stone, and then I needed so many feathers. So again, this is again going back to its 4. So feathers I then had to put back in. So this is where we're going backwards and forwards. So feathers I then had to go back into the excavation shed. Forgive me, feathers is not in the excavation shed. I shall go back into the hunting lodge. For those that are shouting at the screen, yes, apologies. So then I go into the feathers and thought, well, hang on, so I'm going to need about 10 feathers per day. So I made sure that I had 10 or 11 feathers in place. And the leather and the fur related to the leather related to the bags. Fur obviously helps with the clothing, as does the leather as well. And then everything else was left was obviously for meat. And then you just calculate on that. So eventually, I got to a point where I was able to work out how many logs I needed based on the level of the villages I've got at the moment. And I think it was something like another 20 logs per day within this shed. I've topped it up to 40. I've also gone in with planks because of the buckets, which I'll come to in a minute on the well. And sticks, again, speaks for itself when I was talking about the tools. But yeah, I'm still only at 50% intensity for this woodshed. So I've got more than enough scope to increase if I want to increase my firewood or if I want to increase any of the other items. So this is what I kind of did for each item, the basic resource. So whether it's logs, whether it's stone, whether it's copper ore, limestone, the basic starting point. I started with that. So like with the well, the basic starting point is the buckets. So you need to have your buckets. So I've So I've calculated with regards to my buckets of water, again, if you go into the management screen, that I needed 1,000 water per day. So again, you go back into the water items, and a bucket of water. I've got 67 buckets of water of varying degrees of, how can I say, condition, because remember they start at 100%, they have 10 uses, and then they go down to 90%, and so on and so forth. And I calculated that I could probably get away with 5 buckets being made per day from the workshop, which is what we're going back to earlier on with regard to my wife in this game who's been in the workshop. And because of that, I now needed to have 10 planks out of 5 buckets. So it's kind of like you are working on each item, but it does then revert back to the base resource and calculating it on that to make it work for you. And the same can be said regarding the fields. So I currently have 12 working fields at 64 items, 64 plots per field. So that works out at about 760. Bear in mind that at least one of them is a cabbage field. Yeah, one's a cabbage field, so that gets done twice. So we're talking about 830 plots. So then I kind of calculated, well, if I need 830 plots, I need 830 pieces of fertilizer across the year. So then I calculated how much fertilizer will I need. So first of all, I then looked at the fertilizer, and I worked it out as something like 50 odd per day fertilizer. So then I said, okay, so let's go to the barn. Sorry, no, apologies. Let's go to the pigsty. Look at the pigsties and have a look. See how much manure they're generating. So they're generating 98 in this one, and I know it's 38 in the other one, which is enough for 76. So I go back to the barn, and I made sure that I had 76 fertilizer, and that will put me in good stead, because obviously having more than enough will build up a supply that I can dial it back at a later point if I need to. So I may have been rattling on for the last 10 minutes. My apologies if you're already kind of up to speed with this, but for those that aren't up to speed, it's good to utilize, to calculate where you think you are. And remember, for every new villager, these figures will go up. So I've calculated, for example, firewood based on potentially an up and higher level. So another 3 or 4 villagers coming in. That's how I've calculated it on. So that there's more than enough in stock, so that if I do have another villager or 2 coming in, I've got the stock in place already. So I hope that's kind of helped you try and understand, or definitely try and plan your resourcing within this game, so that you're heading towards full automation, pretty much in line of my special edition video, the one before this. So I'm just going to head back over to the main village, and I think again the reason why I'm trying to plan ahead, and all the while you're doing this, you are increasing your technology points. So for example, if I do that production plan of action, which I plan to do when the workshop stops working, I will build up a lot of extraction skill points by just literally not chopping down trees. And as you can see, there's been a lot of trees chopped down. You also see that there's an appearance of a wooden shed. This wooden shed's for me, purely and simply because if I want to make planks, I had to wait for them to finish over on the other woodshed, and I thought, no, I'll have my own little woodshed, because this will get destroyed eventually. But basically I have my own little woodshed, and it'll go from there. And what will eventually happen as well is I'll be starting to build some bigger houses along here. So in my original tour video of my first game save, and also in the special edition video that I just done, you would have seen there's quite a few houses that go along this coastline. And those are the bigger houses. And my plan of action is to start doing that at some point. So again, the more you build up, the better it will be. And like with animals, I plan this time to have a cow shed, which I can't get at the moment. because I think getting milk in and getting milk to make cheese and quark and that will have a big effect on your food supply and your food production. I think I did show you all these guys this last time we were here, so yeah, I'm pretty certain I did. But just to give you another little viewpoint, this may get revamped again in due course, but I'm not overly concerned at the moment. So on that basis, I hope that this particular video has helped you in regard to pretty much practicing what I preached in the special edition, and hopefully it's given you a viewpoint of how to look forward with your own planning. But as always, if you've got any comments or suggestions or questions, please put them in the comments below, because maybe something that you want that I haven't covered, or there may be something you want to go over again. I'm more than happy to do that. And the reason why I'm saying that is that because we're at a stage where the amount of work that's being done is kind of duplicating, there might be a few kind of gaps in between videos. But if I get, if there's something you want me to kind of address in a video, then I'm more than happy to do so. I'm happy to go over items. One of the things I will look at next video is starting to do NPC quests, because I feel I'm in a position at the moment where production is at a point where it's becoming automated with the people I've got in place. I think we'll start looking more about doing NPC quests, which obviously in my mind is one already in this game, and also the Herald quests. So that'll probably be a video that I'll be looking to do next time. So other than that, if you've liked what you've seen, then please click the like button and subscribe. Again, as always, any comments are welcome regarding suggestions that you want to see in the game or items you want me to review. And on that note, I shall see you soon.